I'm Bethany Coleman, and I'll never forget the day my family left me stranded in Genoa, Italy as a joke. We were on a family trip, and I thought it was a chance to mend things. Instead, they ditched me at a crowded market. My wallet empty, no passport, no way home. My sister's voice crackled through the payphone. "You're bothering everyone, Bethany." My mom chimed in. "This is your fault." Their laughter echoed as they hung up, leaving me alone in a foreign country. I stood there heart-pounding, gripping the useless phone, realizing they'd planned this, my own family mocking me like I was nothing. I wasn't just lost, I was betrayed. After a long time, when they saw me again standing next to someone they never expected. Let's just say my dad's jaw hit the floor and he shouted something that changed everything. Stick around to find out who it was. If you've ever been hurt by family, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me, what would you do if your family pulled something like this? I read every single one. Growing up in New York, I was always the odd one out in our family. My sister Lindsay, 5 years older, was the golden child, polished perfect, and already climbing the ranks at a big bank by the time she was 27. My parents couldn't stop bragging about her. "Why can't you be more like Lindsay?" My mom Cheryl would snap, her voice cutting through me whenever I stayed up late sketching. My dad Gary rarely said anything, but his silence screamed agreement. To them, my love for painting was a childish phase, not a future. At 22, I was still searching for myself, but in their eyes, I was a letdown, a dreamer who didn't fit their idea of success. Our house in Queens was a pressure cooker of expectations. Cheryl ran a tight ship, obsessed with how we looked to the neighbors. She'd glare at my paint-splattered jeans, muttering, "You're embarrassing us with those rags." Once she grabbed my sketchbook and tossed it on the counter like it was worthless. "Stop wasting your life on these scribbles," she said. Gary would just nod, avoiding my eyes. "Get a real job, Bethany," he'd mumble if he spoke at all. Lindsay was the worst. At family dinners, she'd smirk at my drawings, saying, "That's cute, Bethany, but it's not a career." Everyone would laugh like my dreams were a joke they were all in on. School didn't offer much refuge. I was studying art at NYU, pouring my soul into every canvas, but I felt out of place among classmates chasing fancy gallery internships. I worked part-time at a coffee shop to afford paint, barely scraping by. That's where I met Eric, my boyfriend at the time. He was a business major, all charm and big plans for a corporate life. At first, he seemed to understand me. We'd talk late into the night about my art, and he'd promise to cheer me on. But when I told him I wanted to skip grad school and focus on painting, his face changed. "You're throwing everything away, Bethany," he said, his voice icy. "I need someone with real ambition." Just like that, he walked out, leaving me to doubt every choice I'd made. The sting of Eric's betrayal was bad, but my family's reaction hurt more. When I told Cheryl about the breakup, she just shrugged. "If you'd listened to him, maybe he'd have stayed," she said, sipping her coffee like it was nothing. Lindsay leaned back in her chair, tossing her hair. "You're too much, Bethany, always chasing fantasies." Gary didn't even look up from his newspaper. It was like I only existed to be criticized. Every family gathering was a reminder of my failures. They'd rave about Lindsay's promotions, her sleek apartment, her perfect life, then turn to me with pity or scorn. "When are you going to grow up?" Cheryl asked once, her tone dripping with disappointment. I wanted to fight back, but I just sat there biting my tongue. I started dodging family dinners, hiding in the studio instead. Painting was my sanctuary, the one place I felt alive. But their voices, Lindsay's taunts, Cheryl's lectures, Gary's silence followed me everywhere. I tried to prove them wrong, entering local art contests, but when I didn't win, Cheryl would say, "See, you should have studied something practical." It burned, but I kept painting, hoping one day they'd see my worth. I thought the family trip to Genoa might be a chance to show them I wasn't the failure they believed. I was so wrong. The family trip to Genoa, Italy was supposed to be a break from everything. I packed my sketchbook, eager to capture the city's old port and narrow streets, thinking a new place might shift things for us. But from the moment we stepped off the plane, Lindsay made it clear she wasn't here for bonding. "Why do you always have to slow us down?" She snapped on our first morning, glaring as I stopped to sketch a crumbling stone arch. Cheryl wasn't any better. "Hurry up, Bethany," she barked, brushing past me like I was a nuisance. Gary trailed behind, his face blank, offering nothing but a shrug when I looked to him for support. The plan was a week exploring Genoa, but it quickly became a showcase for their resentment. Lindsay led the charge, picking apart everything I did. At a cafe near the harbor, I tried ordering in Italian, stumbling over the words. She burst out laughing loud enough to turn heads. "You're making us look ridiculous?" she said, smirking as she sipped her espresso. Mom nodded, her eyes narrow. "Just act like you belong here," she muttered. Dad stayed silent, stirring his coffee, avoiding my gaze. I forced a smile, suggesting we visit a local art gallery, hoping they'd meet me halfway. Lindsay shut it down fast. "Nobody wants to waste time on your art nonsense," she said, and Cheryl steered us toward a shopping street instead, dismissing me with a wave. By day 3, I was drained from their constant jabs. We were at a crowded market in Genoa's old town, surrounded by stalls piled with spices and handmade crafts. I was sketching a vendor's display when Lindsay pulled me aside. "The bus to our next stop leaves at noon," she said, her voice clipped. "Don't mess this up." I checked my watch, 11:30, and rushed to gather my things. But when I reached the bus stop, it was deserted. My stomach dropped. I scanned the street, hoping they were nearby, but my phone rang instead. It was Lindsay. "We're already on the bus," she said, her tone smug. "You were too slow." I heard Cheryl in the background laughing. "You'll figure it out," she added. Gary's chuckle came through faintly. "Just a little prank," Lindsay said before the line went dead. I stood there, my hands trembling, gripping the phone. The market's noise faded as my pulse pounded in my ears. I reached for my wallet. Nothing, not a single euro. My passport was in Cheryl's bag, gone with them. They'd planned this, left me stranded in a foreign country, and laughed about it. I called Lindsay back, my voice shaking. "Why would you do this?" I asked. She didn't even pretend to care. "Maybe now you'll stop dragging us down," she said, her words sharp as knives. The call ended, their laughter ringing in my head. I was alone, abandoned and humiliated. I paced the market, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to run after them, to beg them to come back. I could almost hear Lindsay's smug voice, Cheryl's dismissive tone, Gary's silence. But something else took hold, a spark of anger, of defiance. I'd spent too long trying to win their approval, only to be mocked. Standing in that chaotic market, I realized I didn't have to play their game anymore. That realization would shape everything that came next. I chose to stay in Genoa. It wasn't just about refusing to crawl back to my family, it was about proving I could build something of my own. With nothing but my sketchbook and a stubborn streak, I set out to carve a life in this unfamiliar city, betting everything on my art. Finding a place to live came first. I had no money, no passport, just a backpack with clothes and pencils. Wandering the narrow streets, I found a shabby hostel near Genoa's port. The owner, an older woman named Maria, noticed my frayed jacket and tired eyes. "You need help?" she asked, her voice gruff but kind. I didn't tell her about Lindsay, Cheryl, or Gary, just that I was stranded and could draw. I offered to sketch her portrait for a night's stay. She nodded, and I spent hours capturing her lined face, each stroke a small act of defiance. That drawing earned me a creaky bed for the night. Surviving meant finding money fast. Maria let me stay longer if I cleaned rooms, scrubbing sinks, and sweeping floors for a few euros. It was backbreaking, but it gave me a roof while I figured things out. During breaks, I sketched on the streets, drawing Genoa's colorful docks and bustling squares. Tourists would pause, some dropping coins into my pencil case. Those coins bought bread and cheap coffee, enough to keep me going. I ignored the buzzing of my phone, Lindsay and Cheryl calling, probably expecting me to beg for a ticket home. I didn't pick up. They'd left me with nothing. I'd show them I needed nothing from them. Breaking into Genoa's art scene was tough. The city was bursting with talent, and I was an unknown with no connections. I spent days pitching myself to cafes and small galleries, offering murals or sketches for sale. Most doors slammed shut, but one cafe owner, Luca, took a chance. He wanted a mural of the Liguria coast on his shop's wall. "Do it fast," he said, eyeing me skeptically. I painted through the night, my hands cramped from gripping brushes blending blues and golds, until the wall came alive with crashing waves. By dawn, Luca handed me €50, his gruff face softening. "You got skill, kid," he said. That money felt like a lifeline. I moved into a cheaper place, a tiny room in a shared apartment with two women who spoke little English. The walls were peeling, the sink dripped, but it was mine. I stretched every euro living on pasta and market fruit and kept drawing. The hostel work dried up, so I leaned harder into my sketches, selling quick portraits to tourists in the piazza. Each sale, even just a few euros, was a win, a brick in the life I was building. At night, doubts crept in. I'd lie on my thin mattress staring at my sketchbook, hearing Cheryl's voice, "You're wasting your life." Lindsay's sneer, "You're not a real artist." Gary's silence, heavier than words. I pushed them away, forcing myself to paint each morning. Over weeks, I found a rhythm. I painted murals for small shops, sold sketches on weekends, and bartered drawings for meals when cash was tight. Genoa's streets, once intimidating, started to feel like home. I learned to haggle with vendors, to navigate the city's maze, to live on my own terms. I wasn't just getting by, I was creating something real, something mine. Life in Genoa was starting to take shape. One afternoon, while sketching in a sunlit piazza, I met Tyler Reed. He was a street artist, his hands stained with chalk, setting up a vibrant mural on the cobblestones. I watched him work, blending bold reds and blues into a scene of crashing waves. "Nice lines," he said, glancing at my sketchbook without breaking his stride. I mumbled a thanks, surprised by his American accent. He was from Chicago, he told me, and had been in Genoa for 2 years, living off his art. Something about his easy confidence made me want to keep talking. Tyler was different from anyone I'd met. He didn't just draw, he poured his whole self into it, unapologetic and free. When I showed him my sketches, he didn't sugarcoat his feedback. "You've got talent," he said, pointing at a drawing of the port, "but you're holding back. Push harder." His bluntness stung, but it wasn't cruel like Lindsay's jabs or Cheryl's dismissals. It was honest, meant to help. He suggested I join him at a local street fair where artists sold their work to tourists. "You could make real money," he said, tossing me a spare piece of chalk. I hesitated, but his grin was infectious, and I agreed. The fair was a whirlwind of color and noise. Tyler introduced me to other artists, a tight-knit group who shared supplies and tips. He helped me set up a small booth displaying my sketches of Genoa's old town. When a tourist offered €10 for a portrait, Tyler nudged me. "Charge more," he whispered. "Your work's worth it." By the end of the day, I'd sold 5 sketches, pocketing enough to cover a week's groceries. It wasn't a fortune, but it felt like one. Tyler high-fived me, laughing. "Told you," he said, his eyes bright with encouragement. Over the next few weeks, Tyler became a friend. He showed me the best spots to draw, hidden alleys with crumbling arches, docks where the light hit just right. He connected me with a bar owner who needed a mural for his patio. "Bethany's your girl," Tyler told him, clapping me on the shoulder. I landed the job painting a sprawling vine design that took 3 days and earned me €100. Tyler didn't just open doors. He pushed me to trust my skills. "You don't need anyone's permission to be great," he said one night over cheap wine. His words stuck, drowning out Mom's lectures and Lindsay's sneers. Living in Genoa was still a challenge. I struggled with the language, fumbling through conversations with locals. My tiny apartment with its creaky floors and thin walls felt like a far cry from home. But Tyler's presence made it easier. We'd spend evenings sketching together, swapping stories about our lives. He'd left Chicago after a falling out with his own family, chasing art instead of their expectations. "You're not alone in this," he told me, his voice steady. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a failure, but as someone with potential. I started to find my footing. The bar mural led to another job, painting a storefront with a scene of Genoa's lighthouse. I learned to haggle with vendors for supplies to navigate the city's winding streets without a map. My sketches sold faster at the market, and I even started experimenting with bolder colors inspired by Tyler's fearless style. Genoa wasn't just a place to survive anymore, it was where I was becoming myself. Tyler's friendship was a turning point. He didn't just help me find work, he showed me I could build a life that was mine. And that life was about to take an unexpected leap forward. My art was finally finding its place in Genoa. One crisp autumn evening, I got a chance to show my work at a local art festival in a historic palazzo. Tyler had pushed me to submit my sketches, insisting they deserved a spotlight. I was nervous setting up my small display of charcoal drawing scenes of Genoa's winding alleys and weathered fishermen. The crowd buzzed with locals and tourists, their voices echoing off the marble floors. I stood by my booth, heart racing as people paused to look. A woman in a sharp blazer stopped studying my work. "These are striking," she said, introducing herself as Elena, a curator from a prominent Genoa gallery. She handed me her card, saying we should talk. That conversation changed everything. Elena invited me to her gallery, a sleek space in the city center with soaring ceilings and white walls. She wanted to feature my work in an upcoming group show. "Your perspective is fresh," she told me, pointing to a sketch of the port at dusk. I could barely speak, nodding as she outlined the details. The show would include established artists and my pieces. 5 large-scale drawings would hang alongside theirs. It was my first real break, a chance to be seen as more than a street artist. I walked out of the gallery dizzy with possibility, clutching Elena's contract like it was gold. Tyler stepped up as more than a friend, he became my partner in navigating this new world. He'd been through gallery shows before and knew the ropes. "You need a system," he said, helping me organize my portfolio and price my work. He spent hours with me in a rented studio, framing drawings and planning the display. When I doubted myself, he was relentless. "You're not just good, Bethany, you're unforgettable," he said, his voice firm. His belief kept me grounded, especially when the pressure of the show felt overwhelming. We worked late nights, sipping espresso, tweaking details until everything was perfect. The gallery opening was a blur of faces and clinking glasses. My drawings drew a crowd, their stark lines and bold shadows catching eyes. People whispered, pointing at my name on the wall. Elena introduced me to collectors, and by the end of the night, 3 of my pieces had sold for more than I'd earned in months. A critic from a local art magazine approached, asking for an interview. "You're one to watch," he said, scribbling notes. I felt like I was floating, like Genoa had finally claimed me as its own. Tyler and I celebrated the show's success at a small trattoria, splitting a bottle of wine. He raised his glass, grinning. "To you, taking over the art world," he said. I laughed, but his words sank in. The gallery wanted more of my work, and Elena hinted at a solo show if sales kept up. Tyler offered to handle logistics, scheduling, contract, supplies, so I could focus on creating. "We're a team now," he said, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. I was no longer the girl scrambling to survive. I was an artist with a future. Genoa's art scene embraced me, but the path ahead held bigger challenges. 5 years had carved a new path for me. Back in New York for my first major solo exhibition, I stood in a sleek Manhattan gallery surrounded by my paintings, bold canvases of Genoa's rugged coastlines and vibrant streets. The room hummed with critics, collectors, and curious locals, their murmurs blending with the clink of wine glasses. I'd worked tirelessly for this moment, pouring my soul into each piece. Tyler, now a celebrated artist himself, stood by my side, helping manage the crowd and fielding questions from curators. His presence was a quiet anchor, his sharp grin cutting through my nerves. The exhibition was a triumph. My paintings sold faster than I could track, with collectors offering thousands for pieces I'd once sketched on Genoa's cobblestones. A reviewer from an art magazine called my work raw and commanding, snapping photos for a feature. I was no longer the girl who'd been left behind. I was Bethany Coleman, an artist making waves. Tyler leaned in, whispering, "You're killing it." I smiled, feeling the weight of years of struggle lift just a little. Then I saw them, Lindsay, Cheryl, and Gary, weaving through the crowd. My stomach twisted. I hadn't spoken to them since Genoa, ignoring their calls and messages. Lindsay's face was all false warmth, her smile tight as she approached. "Bethany, we're so proud," she said, her voice dripping with pretense. Cheryl stepped forward, clutching her purse. "We made a mistake," she said, her eyes darting around the gallery. "We want you back in our lives." Gary nodded, his expression stiff. "Let's put the past behind us," he added, his tone flat. Their words felt rehearsed, their eyes lingering on the sold signs next to my paintings. I wasn't fooled. They hadn't come to apologize, they'd come for a piece of my success. Lindsay's gaze flicked to the price tags, her lips twitching. Cheryl kept mentioning family connections in New York, hinting at introductions to wealthy friends. Gary's eyes narrowed when he spotted Tyler, who was charming a group of collectors nearby. "Isn't that Tyler Reed?" Gary muttered, his voice sharp. Then he froze. Recognition hitting him. "You're working with him," he shouted loud enough to turn heads. The room quieted, eyes on us. Tyler turned, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Problem, sir?" he asked, stepping closer. Gary's face reddened. He'd clearly heard of Tyler. His murals were now famous, featured in galleries from London to Tokyo. "You're that street artist," Gary spat, pointing a finger. "You think you're better than us?" Lindsay grabbed his arm, hissing, "Gary, stop." But he shook her off, his voice rising. "You left us for this guy, Bethany. After everything we did." I stared, stunned by his audacity. "Everything they did. They'd abandoned me in a foreign country," laughed as I struggled. Tyler placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice low. "You don't owe them anything," he said, steady as ever. I faced my family, my voice calm but firm. "You don't get to walk in here and claim credit for my life," I said. "You left me with nothing. I built this without you." Lindsay's smile faltered, her eyes cold. Cheryl's face tightened, but she stayed silent. Gary sputtered, but the crowd's attention made him shrink back. "You'll regret this," he muttered, turning away. Lindsay and Cheryl followed their heels, clicking as they left the gallery. The air felt lighter with them gone. Tyler squeezed my shoulder, nodding toward the crowd. "Focus on what matters," he said. I took a deep breath, turning back to the collectors, answering their questions with a renewed confidence. The night ended with nearly all my paintings sold, and a curator approached about a European tour. I'd come back to New York not to reclaim my past, but to prove I'd outgrown it. That night set the stage for what was coming next. My story had come full circle. After the New York exhibition, I returned to my studio, a sunlit loft overlooking the Hudson. Tyler and I sat down to process what had happened. The confrontation with Lindsay, Cheryl, and Gary lingered, but we agreed they didn't deserve a place in our lives. Their fake apologies at the gallery were just another attempt to leech off my success. Tyler, now a force in the art world, was blunt. "They're not your family," he said, his voice steady. "Family doesn't tear you down." I nodded, feeling a weight lift. I didn't need their forgiveness or approval. I'd built my own world without them. Lindsay's reputation took a hit soon after. Word spread in New York's tight-knit art circles about her behavior. Her sharp tongue and manipulative tactics were no secret. A few gallery owners who'd overheard her snide remarks at my show started whispering. Socialites she'd once charmed turned cold when stories of her abandoning me in Genoa surfaced. Her carefully curated image as a perfect daughter and socialite began to crack. She called me once, her voice bitter. "You're ruining my life," she hissed, blaming me for her downfall. I hung up unfazed. Her toxicity had caught up with her, and I wasn't responsible for the consequences. Cheryl and Gary faced their own reckoning. Their social circle, once propped up by Lindsay's connections, shrank as people distanced themselves. Mom tried reaching out through emails, her words laced with guilt. "We can still be a family," she wrote, but it felt hollow. Gary sent a single text. "You owe us an apology." I laughed at the irony. They'd left me to fend for myself in a foreign country, yet expected me to grovel. I blocked their numbers, cutting the last ties. Their isolation was their own doing, not mine. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but now I saw it for what it was, a trap that kept me small. The lesson hit me hard, and it's one I carry every day. Self-reliance and believing in your own worth are worth more than the approval of a family that only brings you down. I learned it the hard way, starting with nothing in Genoa, scraping by on sketches and stubbornness. Tyler's support showed me what real connection looks like, not conditional, not manipulative, but rooted in mutual respect. My art, once a lifeline, became my voice, telling stories of resilience and defiance. I wasn't just an artist now. I was someone who'd chosen herself over a toxic past. Standing in my studio, surrounded by half-finished canvases, I felt free. My work was gaining traction. Galleries in Paris and Berlin were calling, and a solo show was planned for next spring. Tyler and I were planning a joint exhibition blending our styles to tell a story of grit and triumph. I'd built a life that was mine, not dictated by Lindsay's sneers or Cheryl's lectures. Gary's outbursts couldn't touch me anymore. I'd outgrown their shadows, and the world was noticing. I want to hear from you now. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family to find your own path? What did it teach you about yourself? Share your thoughts, your stories. I'm listening. Because sometimes the hardest choice is the one that sets you free.